So I'm very pleased this evening to be joined by Father Lawrence Carney from Wichita in Kansas. The surname Carney is very, very familiar here in County Mayo in Ireland, and I'm sure, Father, you must have some connections. Um, and we're going to talk about this great book that you've published, Preparation for the Total Consecration to the Holy Face of Jesus, how God draws the soul into the purgative, illuminative, and unitive ways. Father, do you just want to kick off about this project, this book, and where what you're looking for with this new book?
Sure. So I wrote the book, The Secret of the Holy Face, the devotion destined to save society. And it's the history of how Jesus is telling us to fight against the revolution in the most specific way as Catholics can. And I know that when I was 25 years old, I was inspired to do the total consecration to Mary, which St. Louis de Montfort prepared by writing his true devotion to Mary, which that spirituality just blew my life away. It was amazing. The consecration to Our Lady changed my life at 25. I wanted to be a conservative Catholic, and really, I just changed. And then I started preaching about this devotion to the Holy Face, the Vela Veronica. And I started thinking there's not a book that has the total consecration preparation to consecrate ourselves to the Holy Face. And there are two prayers of consecration to the Holy Face that came from Tours, France in the 1880s. So I thought, wow, there it is. That's the finish line. And now I just have to write. And so I decided to, since I'm a Dawson priest, to pull from all the different schools of spirituality and put them into a book that's really going to be full of a lot of spiritual classical points, but so that people in the pews can digest them. And so it just came to me in prayer. Well, Jesus was 33 years old. The Trinity is three. My name is Lawrence Carney the third. So I can do 11 days, 11 days, and 11 days to get those three ages, the purgative way, the illuminative way, and the unitive way. And 11/11 is my birthday, and Saint Martin of Tours, uh, his feast day is November 11th. And Tours is where the revelations to the Holy Face came from and where we got the total consecration prayers in the first place. So it all started to connect. And I tell people that I can't give them spiritual direction because I don't have enough time. So I I tell them get this book, and it's like spiritual direction. And one of my friends was telling me 2 days ago she's reading it, and it's like every line is a line of spiritual direction for her. And it's just spiritual classics from Father Garrigou Lagrange and from Tanqueray, from Saint Francis de Sales, Saint Catherine of Siena, the Carmelite Saint St. John of the Cross, Saint Teresa of Avila, and Saint Therese, etc., etc. So that's why I decided to write this book.
And before we were speaking on air, I think you said that 10,000 copies were sold to one Catholic organization in America. So this has really been an incredible launch for the book.
Yeah, so Tan told me that the devil hates your book, Father Carney. And so what happened, Robert, is that they messed, they sent the book to the printer and they made the book too big. And then they sent it back and then they messed up the cover. And then they did that twice. So that's four mistakes right there. And then there was a copyright issue that got resolved. And so they had to pull the book from the shelves. And so now it's been republished about a year after I finished it. But meanwhile, there was the Knights of Columbus in St. Louis, Missouri, that contacted TAM Publishers and said, "Can we just buy 10,000 of these?" I got the email from my publisher, and it said 10K. Father, we just let you know that there's going to be some people buying 10K of your books. I thought, well, that's like 10 books, no big deal. But then he said 10,000. I'm like, whoa, okay. So there's 10,000 copies floating around St. Louis, and I haven't even seen one of them yet. And I'm only 8 hours away in the car. So I think that the fact that the devil has done his work to try to stop this, and God permits this for patience, that virtue that's so important to grow, that it's a sign to me that this book can really help the interior lives of people when the world is going so crazy and we have computers and phones and we just have such a choppy life that I wanted this book to be something to ground people in interior life, and they can take a book in their hands and get away from all the communication and go to a quiet place, maybe in their backyard of their home, or go to a church that's quiet, and they can prepare themselves for 33 days
Mm.
to make this total consecration to the face of Jesus. And so I tell people a prerequisite to this book is to do the total consecration to Mary, because she spent 30 years in solitude with our Lord. She got to know the face of Jesus so well that she can take us to the face of Jesus in the most humble way. And one of the parts of this devotion to the holy face of Jesus is that the Sacred Heart and the Immaculate Heart can never be separated. So that's why I say it's a prerequisite, is that people get true devotion by St. Louis de Montfort. They read that, then they do a good preparation for that. And then once they've consecrated themselves to Our Lady, then they can become ready to prepare themselves to consecrate themselves to the holy face of Jesus. And what's so neat is if you read Revelation, the book of Revelation, a lot of commentators are saying that we're coming into the latter days, the latter years or of the church. And so Jesus told Sister Mary St. Pierre in Tours in the 1840s that this is the greatest devotion. And it makes sense, because wouldn't one of the last devotions ever prepare us for the beatific vision, which
Mhm.
St. Thomas says is the greatest gift God can give to creatures, to see the face of God. And that's an amazing thing to think about, is this devotion is so Christocentric. And I'm a great Marian devotee, but Our Lady just drew me into having this great love of Christ Himself. So
Yeah.
I really do. I appreciate you having me on here. This is one of the first interviews I've done on this book, so I'm so excited to see what God has in store for us here.
Yeah, and you never know. So maybe somebody else is going to come along and get another 10,000 of these. It, I hope that people will read it. Just one question that was coming to my mind before we go into the book. The devotion to the Holy Face. Do you want to just give us 5 minutes on this devotion, how it happened, the whole history, and then we can go into the book? I'm just thinking somebody looking at this interview mightn't understand the devotion and the history.
That's a great question. So, the face of God is mentioned in the Bible 840 times. Then we have Jesus in His passion, and Veronica goes and wipes His face. And it's the sixth station of the cross. And Jesus leaves miraculously His face on her veil. And Veronica goes to Rome with the veil. And the emperor wanted to see the veil of Veronica. And when he saw it, he had leprosy. When he saw it, he was cured instantly. And then the veil was given to St. Clement, Pope Clement the First, and all the popes have been the custodian since then. Then in the 1840s, Jesus began to appear to a Carmelite in Tours, Sister Maria de Saint Pierre, and gave her about 5 years worth of revelations. And the one that I always point out is this: Jesus said to her, "My Father is greatly disappointed in the human race for the sins of blasphemy and profanation of Sundays and holy days of obligation. And my Father's not going to punish the human race so much with the elements, but with the scourge of revolutionary men. So that's the main point I tell people is God's in charge. He's permitting a scourge. In fact, he's giving us the scourge of revolutionary men. And so Jesus called these people out communists. And this was then to become an association of the faithful. Jesus told Sister Mary St. Pierre, have the Archbishop aware of this. And then we enter into the story, Venerable Leo de Pont. And Venerable Leo de Pont became very close to the Carmel there and Sister Mary St. Pierre, and he became the champion of promoting the revelations that were given to her. And he got a copy of the Veil of Veronica. It was a miraculous veil from the miracle in Rome in 1849. I can't get into that. But DuPont put this veil in his drawing room where he did work. He was a lawyer, and he had an oil lamp burning day and night. And he was nicknamed the Holy Man of Tours because he found the relics of St. Martin's that were buried by the French Revolution. And people came to him asking for cures. So he would take the prayers from Sister Mary St. Peter and the oil burning in front of the Veil of Veronica, and people would wipe their eyes, their pains, and their limbs, and they would get cured. There were so many cures that there were 6,000 to 10,000 certified cures that Pope Pius IX heard about this thaumaturgus, which is a fancy name for a miracle man. And so Venerable Leo de Pont dies in 1876 after 30 years of these miracles, and nobody knows about this devotion because it came out in 1885. It was made an arch confraternity by Pope Leo XIII, and Saint Therese and her father Saint Louis Martin signed up, and so Saint Therese derived the latter part of her holiness to the biography and autobiography of Sister Mary St. Pierre because she was told under obedience to read that. And so she had a great love of the child Jesus, but this devotion helped her to have a love of the mature Jesus, the suffering Jesus. And that's the secret is so few people know that she was enrolled in this arch confraternity. And so to sum it all up, this devotion disappeared around 1900. There were priests promoting it, but then they were shut down. And for 100 years, very few people were living this devotion as a confraternity. And then it started to become very popular in the last 5 years. And so I think that we're going to see a great increase in this devotion because it's had a great settling. You know, when they build great cathedrals, they build the basements and they let it settle for like a decade or two. That's kind of what's happened with this devotion. And so it's got such a humble foundation that it can have a great spiritual edifice. So that is the devotion to the Holy Face in about 5 minutes.
Yeah. And I heard about this devotion from Human Life International. Patrick McChrystal and his team, they every year in Ireland, they for around Easter, for Good Friday, they have the billboards of the Holy Face posted. It's a massive campaign that they do. So when I had some knowledge of it, but now when I got your book, it kind of wow, this kind of is it's very very timely. And so you have prepared this 33-day total consecration to the Holy Face. Do you mind taking us through how you constructed the whole book and what was the process of writing it? Just out of interest.
Yeah, so I remember in the seminary they talked about these three ages of the spiritual life, the interior life. And so I always wanted to study more about that. So I thought, well, that would be a great thing. I'll learn while I'm writing this book. And so the three ages deal with the purgative, the illuminative, and the unitive. So the purgative stage, the first 11 days, teaches people how to get rid of deliberate mortal sin. And this stage is where good Catholics want to start. They want to stop committing mortal sin because they want to get to heaven. But the problem is when they go through this level, that they start to lose the consolations of God. Because when someone starts to pray, God gives them lots of consolations, so he draws them in, but then he starts to take that away, and because he wants to strengthen them. And so some people think that they're doing something wrong, so they just give up. And so the purgative way helps people to go all the way through to where they stop committing stop committing mortal sin. And so when people get through that level, then they go into the illuminative way where they start to get rid of deliberate venial sin. So I just said deliberate mortal sin. Well, you don't need the word deliberate. It's mortal sin, period. But deliberate venial sin is the next stage because their love still has a long ways to go. And so it's like the first stage, if you take the example of the apostles, Jesus called Peter and the other apostles, and they were learning from him, and they were sinners. But when they were with Jesus for a few years, they started to move through that phase of mortal sin, and they were still committing deliberate venial sin. They loved Jesus, but they loved him because they were getting something out of it. Like the sons of thunder were their mother wanted James and John to sit on the right and on the left when Jesus came into temporal power. But Jesus corrected her and said, no, no, you can't drink of this chalice. And so the illuminative way helps Catholics see, wait a minute, I need to learn how to love God because he's good, because he's beautiful, because he's true, because he's simple. I don't need to just love God because I'm getting something out of it. And so that's what the illuminative way does. So when people get in the illuminative way, they start to learn how to pray for the gift of spiritual reading, meaning they're able to read spiritual reading at a level that's comparable for them. And they actually assign themselves like 15 minutes a day, and they actually do it, and they don't skip it, and they get disciplined. And then this is where you start to get logs and put it into your spiritual fire. And then that fire can really start to grow that charity. And Jesus said, would that the world would be on love with fire, the divine fire. And so when people get through that deliberate venial sin, when they get over that, the next stage is the stage of union, where there's imperfections are left and accidental type, like their venial sin still, there's some will in there, but they get surprised and they're not quite all the way there. But the age of union, the unitive way, is where the soul has God as the center, and then that interior part of the soul starts to come out to the surface. And that's where you see a clarity, a certain resonance that's going on between God that dwells within and the person. So saints are attractive. And so once they go into that stage of union, there's a clarity. You can tell a lot of a person by his face. And so you see saints with a halo. That's
Mm-hmm.
that light. And so one of the neat things is in this devotion, there's 9 promises. And Jesus said, those who are devoted to my face, their faces will shine in eternity uniquely in a different way than other people in heaven. So that's the structure of the book. And then on the 34th day, so those are 33 days, on the 34th day, they'll make a total consecration. And I have a little chart in the front of the book that has different feast days, like the Annunciation, or which is March the 25th. And then there's St. Peter, who's the patron saint of the Arch Confraternity of the Holy Face, which is June the 29th. But then it goes backwards to like May the 27th is the first day. And there's other feasts like St. Veronica, the Transfiguration, St. Louis, who is a special patron of the Arch Confraternity, St. Louis, the King of France,
Mm-hmm.
St. Michael the Archangel, St. Martin of Tours. And this is just a guideline. People can start it at any time, but it's nice to have a special date that you'll remember forever. Like October the 3rd is St. Therese. People can start on August the 31st, for example. So that's all in the book, how to do that.
Okay. You mentioned there the nine promises. Do you mind introducing us a little bit to those nine promises?
Sure. So one of the promises is that Jesus said that people will have final perseverance. And so we can never merit final perseverance. And final perseverance means that someone, when they die, they're going to go to heaven eventually, if they have to pass through purgatory. And another promise is Jesus said that just like the effigy of a coin, it has the face of the king. You can go to market with that and buy whatever you want at the market. But devotion to the holy face is like the effigy of the face of Jesus that can be used to purchase from the Father many treasures from heaven. Another promise is that there will be many miracles. So we have Venerable Leo Dupont, who had 6 to 10,000 miracles. And then we have Sister Wilhelmina, who some of you may not know who she is, but I was her chaplain for the last 6 years of her life. And she was a Benedictine in Missouri, and they discovered her body incorrupt. And the bishop has done an investigation on that, and there will probably be a cause of her canonization at some point. But the point is, she enrolled in the confraternity of the Holy Face with the Carmelites in Dallas, Texas. So that's a little word on the structure. In order for a confraternity of the Holy Face to exist, a bishop can erect it, or the local ordinary of any diocese. He can erect one, and then there can be a group that will come together once a month and fulfill all the duties, and they will participate in the promises. And so sort of that's one of my lifetime goals, is to get a lot of bishops to start confraternities around the world. I want to try to get 1 million people to join before the Lord takes me. So that was inspired from St. Louis de Montfort again, his book on the secret of the Rosary. There was a Dominican who was not living a very good life, and the Blessed Virgin Mary appeared to him and gave him a necklace and an invisible ring and said, Alan, you haven't been a good priest, but now go preach the Rosary. And so he preached the Rosary the rest of his life and had 100,000 people join the confraternity of the Rosary. And I thought, wow, if someone can, and he's a blessed now, if someone can get BL in front of their name, maybe if I can get 1 million people into this arch confraternity, something might happen there. And that's just it, is God wants us all to be canonized saints. He wants it more than we do. So it's not prideful to want to be holy. Holy means to be set apart from the world. So that's a summary of some of the promises. I can't think of all of them off the top of my head right now, but I hope that gives someone a little taste of the promises.
Yeah. That's very important, and we'll be able to detail those out in the kind of the document, the notes for this video. I'll put them all in there. You said you were looking for 1 million people to enroll. Is that just in the States or worldwide?
That is worldwide.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm going to be going to Australia for the first time in my life next year to do a Holy Face tour. And I'm going to go to Italy and preach in Sicily. And I don't know Italian, so I said, how am I going to do this? And the lady, my friend there, said, well, Father, I'll just translate it into Italian while you're preaching. I'm like, oh, yeah, that'll work. So one of these days, I hope I'll get invited to Ireland.
Yeah.
Uh, I've been told for the last 10 years that someone needs to invite me to Ireland to preach a mission just on the whole island. So that would be amazing if that happened.
Well, I think there'd be no better group than Human Life International Patchen McChrystal. They have a new centre in Knock, and their whole team have been promoting. I only heard they gave me this Medal of the Holy Face. Was- This is the one I usually wear. It was them that gave it, and I only heard about the Holy Face from them. They were the ones that really introduced it. And every year they would give out leaflets and do the whole campaign on it. And so definitely, if you're coming to Ireland, I think they would be the best group to organise it, and I'm sure we'll be in touch with you definitely on that over the next couple of months, especially maybe leading up to Good Friday next year. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, yeah.
And one thing that you've touched on is the purgative, illuminative, unitive ways, and the three stages of the spiritual life. There, and this seems to be something that seems to be propping up in different books. Like Ralph Martin has the fulfillment of all desire, and he's also speaking about that in his brilliant book. Is this? Do you see this as a kind of a turning point in the church where our theology seems to be inspired in many ways by various people to start meditating on this age-old process of transforming union? Is this just because it's not it doesn't seem to be coordinated. It seems to be different countries, different people speaking about the same call of our Lord.
Yeah, well, I tell people they're saying, Father Carney, what do I do if the bishop does this or the pope does that? Or what happens if this is taken away? And I say, there's 1,000 possible ways to answer that. So what we need to do is learn about the interior life so God can put the answers right on our heart. And the devil is always performing interference and trying to get us off from the goal. The reason why we were created is to be in union with God. And so the church was given to us for right worship and to save souls. And when someone gets the deep interior life, usually a lot of suffering will come. And that's when they can save a lot of souls. I mean, suffering is the currency for salvation. I mean, just look at the cross.
Mhm.
That's that's where it's at. And we need to be disciplined. And I think that we've lost our compass in the modern day with the church too, is there are so many spiritual classics of the interior life and so many maxims that we need to put in front of our face again. And that's what I've done in this book is I've put in so many sayings by the saints. But people need not just to read something for the sake of reading it, but they need to have a goal. That's why I lined it up with these 33 days with the goal of consecration so people can break it up in days so it's not a lot one day and then none the next. They have to keep being disciplined and doing just the right. And so one of the secrets of the interior life is to be disciplined, and that is to have a daily rule of life. Okay, so what do I do, Father? Well, what's your promises to God? Are you going to go to Mass 3 times a week? Are you going to go to Mass every day? You make that promise to God, and once you make the promise, you fulfill it. You don't mess up. Don't make it too hard. Don't make it too easy. 5 decades a day, 15 minutes of meditation, spiritual reading for 10, 15 minutes for lay people. For religious, a holy hour should be 1 hour, and a priest, 1 hour. Carmelites, it's 2 hours a day. And so you start to get this spiritual list, and you start to get into a rhythm, and your soul then starts to get nourished by really beefy spiritual sayings to get you through it. Like one saying that I use a lot is St. Louis Bertrand said, Lord Jesus, cut me, burn me, don't spare me on this side of eternity. That's hard to hear for a modern man because we like the comforts that we have. But it teaches me a lesson. We should ask God for the suffering that He wants to give us nothing more and nothing less. So that's not scary. And this book also helps to give people a greater faith, hope, and love in God, because those are the theological virtues that deal with the object of God. And so this devotion is reminding us to give God back his rights. It seems like we humans that are full of error are telling everyone else what God is when he's revealed himself completely different to what a lot of people say he is. And so it's going back to the basics of what's the faith that we have in God? What is hope? What is charity? So hope is that virtue that allows us to get something that's arduous, that is to be in heaven. But it helps us from the two pitfalls. One pitfall is to have presumption, and the other pitfall is to have despair. And so it teaches people again. There's a book that was written a long time ago called Back to Virtue. And so we need to have that theology of going back to virtue. So, what is a virtue? The book says it in here. Vir is the Latin word for man, and virtue means strength. And so, virtue means to do a good habit about 7 times. Once you do a good habit 7 times, it becomes a virtue. And then people start to get strong spiritually, and they, oh, aha, this isn't as bad as I thought it was, because they're starting to attack it incrementally. The spiritual life, they're attacking it and attacking their domestic enemy, which is their prevalent sin, which the 7 deadly sins. This book teaches people how to figure which one of those it is. And once you know your domestic enemy, you can start to unmask it and start to drive it out with the help of God, with the help of devotional life, and start to go through those different levels of spiritual life. And when people go to the higher parts of the spiritual life, God starts to draw them quickly, more quickly. He accelerates drawing them up to him. So, yeah, and at the end, the goal, which is normal for each Christian, is the spiritual marriage.
Yes.
That is when what I was saying earlier, the God within us is coming to the surface. Everything is about the move. God moves souls that get into that stage. And we need saints today so badly. I mean, St. Padre Pio is one of the last great saints that had a lot of miracles. We're going through the Passion. The church is going through the Passion. So this is a crash course of getting some saints to do the hard work, to work with God, to work with a confessor if they can't find a spiritual director. And this book is hopefully going to get people a map of the spiritual life so they're not scared of it anymore. Okay, Father, I can do 1 month. I can do that. And then that should be the beginning of many great things. So hopefully those 10,000 copies in St. Louis, some people are reading them because a lot of good can happen. And I think if priests talk about this traditional way of the interior life again, faith comes through hearing, Romans 10. And if I may be talking about this for the next few years, and that would be a joy to be a missionary of the interior life, to be a missionary of the holy face devotion. So this devotion wasn't just created in a vacuum. It was given to us by God to fight revolutionary men. And so when people get really scared about hearing about a new world order or new world religion or deep state, deep central banking system, that stuff shouldn't scare anybody because God's permitting it for souls to grow in virtue. So when suffering happens, when temptations happen, we shouldn't get mad at that. We should see that, the saints saw, the saints saw the permissive will of God. They didn't focus on the evil, but they focused on the permissive will of God. And if souls learn, these troubling things that are happening, that's for me to grow in a certain virtue I'm missing. And St. Albert the Great wrote a book about the virtues, and he says there's about 42 virtues. And so we can't just have one or just 41. We have to have them all in order to become saints. I told a Marine once, he said, Father Carney, I love the traditional Latin Mass. just tell me what to do and I'm going to fight. I said, sir, you have to have all the virtues. You can't just be courageous. You know, some men would fight in the medieval times and they would just kill the enemy. They were very courageous, but then they would go commit adultery that night. That's not a holy man. You've got to have all the virtues. And he said, yeah, I believe what you're saying is right. That's hard because virtue is not something you just wake up one day and you have it.
Yeah, indeed. And my mentor on the prayer life, Jean Curie from the School of Prayer and School of Mary in London, he echoed very much what you said because he oftentimes I get frustrated about the church and the crisis. And he said, Robert, the only way is union with God. And sometimes all of these distractions and everything kind of take us away from actually focusing on what we need to do. And the only way to change the church is to be a saint. I
Yeah,
mean, it's not that the church, Christ Church, is beautiful as it is, but he's looking for other Christs at this moment in time. And so, if this theology comes out, which is the age old, I mean, this is, as Jean says, this is so deep in our Christian theology, all of what you're saying, that we just have to draw it out of the well and give people some water to drink. People will say, "Well, this is an incredible moment, incredible chance to know Christ," but we seem to be kind of selling ourselves short. So, your book. I mean, once I saw you were talking about the same thing as Jean, it is the solution to the crisis because we can we can we can criticize others all the time, but we can do the other path, which Christ never sent his apostles off to go off and start criticizing everyone else. He says, "Hold on a second, guys. You need to be transformed. You need to change." So I loved the practicality of what you've done in putting it into those segments, and I really do hope people will buy this book. Um, is there any other aspect that you want to focus on, or something that you want to kind of leave for the viewers
sure.
about the book?
So in this book, there's some prayers that come from the revelations of Sister Mary St. Pierre, and it's all from her. And one of them is the Chaplet of the Holy Face. And the Chaplet of the Holy Face was given by Jesus to Sister Mary St. Pierre for the triumph of the Catholic Church. And so we want the triple triumph. Good Catholics want the triumph of the Sacred Heart for the social reign of Jesus Christ, the triumph of the Immaculate Heart, Our Lady of Fatima, and then the triumph of the Church. So there should be an era someday that will happen. So the Chaplet of the Holy Face makes reparation to the five senses of Jesus during his passion. And for the 3 years of his public life, it makes honor to that. And the main prayer is, Arise, O Lord, let the enemies be defeated, and let all that hate thee flee from before thy face. So I put that into the 33-day preparation as a prayer every day so people can learn to pray it, and they can get a chaplet which has sextets instead of decades. So that's 6 beads times 5 for the five senses, and then 3 more for the public ministry. That's 33, just like the 33 years of Jesus, just like the 33 days of preparation. And so when people pray this chaplet, I call it a minor exorcism for lay people, because the minor exorcism that was written or approved by Leo the 13th, that exorcist used as a diagnostic, had Psalm 67, verse 2, which is the very prayers that this chaplet has to drive away the evil. And St. Athanasius told the demons under oath, what verses do you hate the most in the Bible? And this was one of them, Psalm 67, verse 2. So we started a chaplet crusade of the Holy Face, and we want to try to get 250,000 people to pray for the spread of the church in its traditions and etc. So we have a website, the League of St. Martin, where people are pledging to do that. Right now, we have about 82,000, and we want to get 250,000 to pledge to pray those many chaplets. That's by January the 16th. So there's 6 months' time, and today's the 16th. So we've been in it for 1 month. So I think that people would join this crusade. This will be the first of many over the years, I think. And there were crusades done with the rosary there because it really fought against communism. There was Father Peyton. I
Yeah.
think he's a native of Ireland, or his
He's
family came from there.
his birthplace is 10 minutes from where I live. I'm
I
right
want to see
beside.
it.
Yeah, his
I'm
the
going to
fa
read his biography. I just found it in my bookshelf, and he was amazing. He was helicoptered
Yeah.
in a city in California, 1961, and he preached the rosary. He crisscrossed the nation. He went to South America, and I think he really helped stop communism from coming into the US. And he, in California, he said one line, I believe in God. I believe in God. I believe in God. And it's like, that was so profound. That's what we say when we say the creed, but he made me stop for a minute instead of just going through the prayer. Wow, that is so profound. And then there was millions of Brazilian ladies who would go into the streets during the 1960s because communism was about to take over. And then there was the Austrian situation where Austria was really brutally punished after the war, World War II, and Moscow and England and the US and another nation kind of watched over them. And so communism was kind of coming down the pike. And then this, I forget the name of the priest, but he began a rosary crusade. They were praying millions of rosaries. And the communists left, they just dropped their weapons.
Mhm.
So I think that our church needs to have a crusade, the Catholic Church, so that we can get back to our morals, get back to the basics that Jesus taught us. And so the best things in the church always start with contemplation. They always start with contemplation. And so there's a lot of traditional men, they're like all fired up and they're like, bitter zeal, this news is bad and that. And we need some of that. But sometimes we've got to say, hey guys, your head's hitting a glass ceiling. Well, let's get over the bitter zeal and go through the different stages of the interior life. And you will be so much more effective by teaching your people how to go through the interior life and have a heroic charity for the enemies of the church. And that's one of the secrets of the devotion of Holy Face. It's taught me so well that we have to pray for our enemies. And Jesus said the sign that someone is really growing in the prayer life is that they pray for their enemies. So if it wasn't for the prayers of Saint Stephen, would we have a Saint Paul? I mean, that's an amazing story. And if it wasn't for the prayers of you, me, and 10 other guys right now, wouldn't we have the conversion of those people that are causing problems up high? It can happen.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a hard lesson because you echo exactly what Jan is trying to say to us. The solution is personal holiness. I mean, and sometimes we can get distracted from everything else. But if there's no greater path in the spiritual life than union with God. It's exactly what you're hitting on the same points. There's so many. It seems to be prophetic in our time that so many people now, Dan Burke with Apostole Via and his work, Jean yourself, Ralph Martin and his work, and if we do this. We truly transform the church because the church will see in us reflected Christ who's trying to reach souls. And it can seem very defeatist in a way because it's interior, it's you have to spend time, contemplation, prayer. It can seem very, for men anyway, it can seem very well, it's very spiritual, but there is no other way to encounter Christ, I believe. I don't believe you can truly know him without actually going through that path that the mystics have spoken about. I don't think there's any other way we can go.
Yeah, Robert, it's just I consider it a privilege to be living in these times that are so bad. And men, God, He wants to see us fight. And men, if they're put to the corner, get holy. Otherwise,
Yeah.
your family. This is a time for men to rise up, and they were created in by God in these times. And so it's time to take the weapons of the chaplet of the Holy Face, the rosary, the spiritual life, and be men. Vir means man. Virtue means strength. So spiritual strength is the answer instead of having a defeative attitude. And I hope that this conversation here and this book and like the men you've mentioned, that the leaders of the Catholic Church, you know, cardinals and the Pope and bishops and archbishops, but also laymen that are leaders, we start leading the charge of the interior life because that'll change the church for the better. And things are so bad it's like, okay, it can get worse, and I think it might, but when it gets worse, it's like a bear market investment. The interior light is going to shine through the darkness very brightly. And so I'm asking men and women too to take the interior life up because the Carmelites are smaller, the religious lives and contemplatives are smaller, and so we're not gonna get God to fight this war for us until we start to beg Him from true interior hearts. And I think that's the answer is we need a direct divine intervention to change the way things are going now.
Yeah.
And the best way is to ask God from the heart of hearts. The more pure our hearts are, the more He'll listen and He'll fight the war for us.
Mhm. Amen. So what I'll do is I'll leave a link to your book here in the video and to the where people can sign up. You mentioned is there a website where people can sign up?
The League of St. Martin, so they can search the League of St. Martin or they can go, it's on the home page where they can get my book. And also on the home page, it's the great Chaplet crusade. We had a man from Alan Munro from Perth, Australia, made a beautiful poster. So it's really inspiring. So I thank him for that. He's just volunteering his help. So we
Yeah.
appreciate anyone
Good.
that wants to pledge for this. It'd be awesome if we can get 250,000 people to pledge for the spread of tradition, for the triumph of the Catholic Church.
Yeah. And this is the as I said to so many people, this is the great tradition. There's no greater tradition than what you're doing in teaching us and mentoring us on the interior life. When we attend traditional Latin Mass, it is in view of a greater growth in interior holiness in union with God. All of these mysteries, our rosaries, everything, and this great tradition that you're promoting is so badly needed in the church. So I'm very enthusiastic. So I'll put a link to all of these things at the bottom of the video so people can get the book, sign up to the League of Saint Martin. What Saint Martin of
Of
where?
Tours,
Of
the
Tours.
Tours France.
Okay. And we'll hope to spread the word on this, especially as we draw near to Easter next year. I think it's very timely that we can get the word out there. And
Great.
I thank your time, Father, for everything. And I do know about Sister Wilhelmina, and maybe at some other time we can get you on to do an interview about her. I think she's one of these. Um, I mean, it's interesting. We have all of this debate on tradition and traditional Latin Mass, and this hidden sister comes to the fore after so many years that loved the faith. I mean, God is the God of surprises, bringing in this kind of hidden woman at the end of the day.
Yeah, she
Yeah,
really amplifies the whole message of the Holy Face. And yeah, if we do an interview,
yeah,
she just left a great legacy. I could talk a lot about what she left. And
yeah.
God wanted to say, okay, follow her.
Exactly.
Follow her. Look at what I'm doing to her. Amazing.
it's exactly that when we were so polarized and on different things, and our Lord says, I got the same sense, this is the person that I want you to look at. So it's fascinating the God of surprises and what He's
Yeah.
trying to do. Anyway,
Yes.
thanks, Father, and it was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Robert. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem.